exhausted after a long day. Ryan practically threw himself onto his bed as soon as he got to his room. He didn't have the energy to do anything other than bury his face in his pillow, letting his body sink into the familiar softness of the mattress. The room darkened, leaving only the faint light from the bedside lamp, enough to make the space feel warm and quiet. The house was the same, unusually silent. His parents had been away on a business trip for the past week, leaving Ryan and Logan, his stepbrother, to manage daily life on their own. Normally, this quiet wouldn't exist. Logan had a habit of turning on the TV late, playing games with the headphones turned up so loud you could hear the gunfire from the next room. But tonight, everything was enveloped in absolute silence. Ryan guessed that Logan still wasn't home. He'd been gone all day, probably at a friend's house or wandering somewhere in the city. They didn't usually talk much, not because they hated each other, but because they both kept a certain distance. Logan had always been the easygoing, somewhat impulsive type, while Ryan was more quiet and preferred to be alone. But tonight, as Ryan let himself drift off to sleep, he didn't think about any of that. The blanket embraced him like a warm hug, pulling him into a rare moment of relaxation. His body gradually sank down, his mind fading with the slow rhythm of his breathing. And then, a sound echoed in the quiet room. His bedroom door opened. Half asleep, Ryan heard the creak of the door opening. A slight draft of air entered the room, slipping past the blanket that enveloped him. He felt a change in the atmosphere, as if someone had just entered. But Ryan's consciousness was too hazy to react, his body heavy with the lingering exhaustion from a long day. Soft footsteps approached the bed. Ryan realized it wasn't a hallucination. A part of him wanted to open his eyes, but the fatigue made him only able to lie still, breathing steadily as if unaware of what was happening. The mattress dipped slightly behind him. Someone had just sat down. A chill ran down his spine as he realized Logan was there, only inches away. Logan didn't speak. He just sat there, the silence between them so thick that Ryan could hear his heartbeat gradually increasing. He tried to convince himself that this wasn't strange. Logan often stopped by his room to ask about a game, borrow something, or simply because he was bored and wanted someone to talk to. But something felt different tonight. Ryan felt Logan moving closer. The space between them narrowed, little by little, until Logan's warmth brushed against his shoulder. And then, he felt it, a light, fleeting touch on his shoulder. A small gesture, but one that made Ryan's body tense up. It wasn't the familiar shoulder bump of two brothers. Not a gentle shake to wake him up. No. This touch was different, slow, hesitant, as if Logan was questioning whether he should do it. Ryan remained still, trying to control his breathing so that it wouldn't reveal that he was awake. He felt Logan's fingers lightly tracing his arm, following the fabric of his pajamas in a hesitant but deliberate way. Logan's breathing became clearer as he moved closer. Ryan didn't know what he was expecting. He just knew that his body couldn't move, even though his brain was screaming at him to speak up, to ask what Logan was doing. But instead of doing that, he just lay there, immersed in the strange sensation that was creeping into every fiber of his body. Then, something else happened. Logan's breath brushed against his neck, hot, making his skin crawl. Ryan held his breath, and before he could process everything, he felt something soft brush lightly against his neck. A kiss. Ryan froze. He couldn't pretend anymore. Ryan felt his whole body stiffen. Logan's warm breath still brushed against his skin, and the trace of that fleeting kiss was still imprinted, like an electric current running down his spine. He couldn't lie to himself anymore. This wasn't an accident. His heart was pounding in his chest. so loudly that he feared Logan could hear it. What should he do? Sit up? Push Logan away? Ask what the hell he was thinking? But all the rational responses were stuck in his throat, giving way to a suffocating silence. Why would Logan do that? Subconsciously, Ryan moved slightly, his body tense under the soft blanket. At that moment, Logan also stopped, as if realizing Ryan was awake. But instead of leaving or appearing flustered, he just remained silent, his breathing steady, though with a hint of hesitation. What was he waiting for? Ryan didn't know where he got the courage from, but he slowly turned around. Every movement was slow, as if time was passing slower than normal. When his eyes opened, he met Logan's gaze, deep blue eyes, darker than normal in the dim light. They looked at each other, neither speaking a word. The air in the room became so thick that Ryan felt short of breath. Logan was right in front of him, close enough that he could feel the warmth from his skin. He could clearly see every line on Logan's face, a gaze filled with struggle, confusion, but also something else, longing. Ryan swallowed hard, trying to find the most logical explanation for this situation. But instead of doing that, he just looked at Logan, as if this was the first time he'd truly seen him. Neither of them moved, neither of them spoke, and then, Logan did something Ryan never expected. He leaned down, slowly, cautiously, as if he was waiting for Ryan to push him away. Waiting for a rejection, but Ryan didn't do that. He didn't know what was controlling him in that moment. But he didn't flinch, nor did he look away. Their lips touched. It wasn't a hurried kiss, not a sudden explosion. It was gentle, hesitant, almost probing, as if both of them were testing to see if this was a mistake. But as soon as Logan's lips touched his, Ryan realized that this wasn't a mistake. He didn't want this to stop. Ryan closed his eyes, and in that moment, he let go of all his worries, doubts, and fears. He responded to the kiss, and the world around them suddenly vanished. Logan's kiss was gentle but carried an undeniable weight. Ryan felt the warmth radiating from him. Every rapid breath intertwined in the quiet space of the room. At first, the kiss was just a light touch, as if both of them were testing to see if this was really happening. But then, Logan moved slowly, his lips gently pressing closer. And Ryan couldn't stop himself from responding. He couldn't stop. A part of him screamed that this was wrong, that they shouldn't go any further. But the rest, the part that he'd never dared to admit, had completely surrendered. Logan seemed to feel that too. He moved closer, a strong arm placing around Ryan's hips, pulling him a little closer. Ryan could feel the tension in Logan's body, as if he was also struggling with himself. But that didn't stop him. The kiss gradually deepened, slow but no longer hesitant like before. Logan's fingers traced the hem of Ryan's pajamas, lightly brushing against the skin underneath the fabric, making every nerve on Ryan's body awaken. He shivered at the touch, a strange sensation that was both unfamiliar and familiar at the same time. Ryan tilted his head slightly, allowing Logan to move closer, his chest heaving as he felt his breath brush against his skin. His heart was beating so fast that he was sure Logan could hear it. And then, suddenly, Logan stopped. He still held Ryan in his arms, but didn't move any further. Ryan opened his eyes, looking straight into the deep gray eyes in front of him. Logan was watching him, his gaze a mixture of longing and fear. "Ryan?" His voice was hoarse, as if struggling with himself. Ryan didn't know what to say. He just knew that he didn't want this to end. Without thinking, Ryan gently touched Logan's cheek. Logan tilted his head into his hand as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Do you want me to stop?" Logan asked, his voice so low and honest that it made Ryan's heart ache. This was the moment for him to back away, to pretend this never happened. But instead, Ryan just shook his head slightly. "No," he whispered, his voice more certain than he'd ever thought possible. A smile flickered across Logan's lips before he leaned down and kissed Ryan again. And this time, there was no hesitation. This kiss wasn't as slow or shy as before. It was deeper, stronger, as if they had bypassed the last of their barriers. Ryan felt the warmth from Logan, every gesture of his no longer carrying hesitation. Logan's hand slid down Ryan's waist, tightening slightly, pulling him closer. Ryan allowed himself to be swept away. No longer thinking, no longer afraid. He didn't care what this meant or where it would lead. All he knew was that he wanted Logan. A quiet sigh escaped as their lips parted for a moment. Ryan opened his eyes, meeting the intense gaze from Logan, a gaze that he had never seen before. No more confusion, no more hesitation, only desire and acceptance. Logan reached out, gently caressing Ryan's jaw, his fingers skimming across the hot skin. "I don't know since when," Logan murmured, his voice deep and slightly offbeat. Ryan swallowed hard, his heart still beating erratically. "Since when? What?" Logan paused for a moment, his eyes sweeping across Ryan's face as if he was memorizing every detail. "Since when I started to feel this way about you." Those words struck Ryan's mind, making him feel like he was being swept into a whirlwind of emotion. He knew he should say something, but the words were stuck in his throat. He could only look at Logan, his heart a jumble of emotions. "Have you ever felt the same way?" Logan asked, his voice low but full of anticipation. Ryan knew he could deny everything right now. He could pretend that this was just a moment of losing control, that this was just a temporary misunderstanding. But deep down, he knew that wasn't the truth. He took a deep breath, then nodded slightly. Logan lifted his lips slightly. A soft smile, but full of relief. He reached out, gently pulling Ryan closer, their foreheads touching. "Then don't pretend anymore," Logan whispered. Ryan closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and when Logan kissed him again, he knew that he had completely surrendered. No more hiding, no turning back. Ryan didn't know how much time had passed since their lips touched again. All he could feel was the warmth of Logan, the pounding rhythm of his heart, and the intense emotions that he had never dared to admit before. Logan wasn't hasty. He touched Ryan with an unusual patience, his fingers sliding gently on his skin, as if memorizing every line. Each gesture was full of appreciation, as if this was something he had suppressed for a long time. Ryan closed his eyes, allowing himself to be immersed in this moment. No more thinking about tomorrow. No more worrying about the potential consequences. Only Logan, right here, right now. He could feel Logan's strong arms sliding along his back, pulling him closer, as if the distance between them still wasn't close enough. This feeling, too real, too clear to deny. Logan's breath was hot as he whispered, his voice low, close to Ryan's ear. "Do you know how long I've been waiting for this moment?" Ryan opened his eyes, meeting Logan's gaze. His eyes were darker than usual, full of emotions that Ryan wasn't sure he was ready to face. But instead of avoiding them, he felt safe. He smiled slightly, a smile that was somewhat shy but sincere. "Maybe, as long as I have." Logan paused for a second, as if stunned by those words. But soon after, he chuckled softly, a smile full of relief, mixed with something like victory. "Then don't make me wait anymore," Logan whispered, then leaned down again, his lips touching Ryan's lightly, this time with certainty. Ryan responded without any hesitation. All barriers between them officially collapsed. They had crossed the line, and there was no going back. The silence of the room seemed to swallow them whole. But inside Ryan, everything was in chaos. His heartbeat was pounding in his chest as Logan's lips pressed against his again. This time without any hesitation or probing. It was deeper, stronger, as if Logan had abandoned all his final restraints. Ryan felt Logan's hands slide along his back, each touch making him feel like he was losing control. The warmth from Logan spread, engulfing Ryan, making him unable to think of anything other than being here with him. He knew this was wrong. He knew that if anyone found out, things would never be the same again. But why couldn't he stop? Logan moved, gently pushing Ryan down onto the bed, his eyes not leaving him for even a second. Those eyes contained so many things that Ryan didn't dare to interpret: desire, confusion, and even a yearning that he had never seen in Logan before. Ryan swallowed hard. He could feel Logan's breath brush lightly against his skin as he leaned closer. "Ryan," Logan whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. Ryan opened his eyes, looking at him. "Yeah?" Logan paused, his eyes seeming to want to engrave this moment forever. "Do you want me to stop?" Ryan knew this was his only chance to escape. If he said yes, Logan would leave. They could pretend that this had never happened. But if he said no, Ryan swallowed, his breath still ragged. He could feel every cell in his body waiting for an answer. Waiting for him to admit the truth that he had been avoiding for so long. He didn't want to stop. "No," Ryan whispered, his voice as light as a breath. Logan's smile only flashed for a second before his lips met Ryan's again. And this time, there was no escape. Ryan's breath was swallowed whole as Logan pulled him into a deep kiss. Without reservation, without hesitation, Ryan's body burned under Logan's touch, his fingertips sliding over his skin as if drawing a story that they had never dared to admit. Everything was too fast, too intense, but also too right that Ryan no longer wanted to stop. However, amidst that ecstasy, a part of his mind still sounded small warning bells. This will change everything. Their relationship, which had always been on a fragile boundary, had now officially crossed the threshold of control. They couldn't go back to being normal stepbrothers. They couldn't continue to pretend that nothing had happened. But did that matter? Ryan looked into Logan's eyes as he parted from his lips for a brief moment, as if to guess what he was thinking. There was no regret in Logan's eyes, only certainty. "Don't think anymore," Logan whispered, his voice husky. Ryan didn't know if Logan was reading his mind or not, but those words were like a cut that tore through all his doubts. So, he wouldn't think anymore. Ryan wrapped his arms around Logan's neck, pulling him down again, and this time he initiated the kiss. Logan shivered slightly at that boldness, but immediately responded with an intensity that Ryan had never felt before. The room seemed to shrink, leaving only them, in a world that only had two people. No future, no past, only the present, where Ryan finally let himself completely immerse himself in Logan. Ryan had never thought that a moment could change everything. But right now, as he lay there, their breaths mingling, every line of their bodies pressed together in a closeness that he had never imagined, he knew that there was no turning back. He could feel every beat of Logan's heart, every slow but sure movement of him. Logan wasn't rushing, every finger of his sliding gently on Ryan's skin, as if wanting to memorize every detail, every gap between them before it completely disappeared. Because after tonight, they weren't the same people anymore. Ryan didn't know how to describe this. Not a sudden explosion, not a crazy feeling like in exciting romantic stories. No, what was between them was more delicate, more real, something deep, intense but also full of tenderness. Logan leaned down, his forehead resting on Ryan's. his breath brushing against his lips. "Are you okay?" Logan asked, his voice so small that it almost disappeared into the air. Ryan didn't know how to answer. He should feel scared. He should feel worried about what would happen next. But in this moment, with Logan right here, he just felt peaceful. He nodded slightly. "Yeah." A soft smile appeared on Logan's lips. A smile that Ryan had never seen before. It was no longer his teasing or indifferent smile. This was something more real. Something that came from the deepest place in his soul. Logan moved closer, placing a light kiss on Ryan's forehead before whispering, "Then don't think." Ryan closed his eyes, letting himself drift along with those words. Letting himself step over the blurred line that they had both been trying to avoid. And he knew, from this moment, nothing could hold them back.